Twashtri draws its inspiration from the Vedic god of the same name, Twashtra, god of creation, the divine architect. In the same spirit, we aim to create a space where new ways of thinking and exploration is appreciated to dive into deeper ranges of human psychology. Our mission is to build capacity among the young minds and larger community through a unique approach that combines contemporary psychological principle with traditional Indian knowledge system to become the perfect instrument for the forces of higher consciousness to act in the marching forward of the human race towards a new world of conscious living. A very warm welcome to you all on behalf of Twashtri Learning Research Center. I am Mrithula, psychology undergraduate student currently interning at Twashtri under the supervision of Roopali ma'am. So today's workshop is an introductory workshop on Indian psychology where we will be covering few topics. We have three experts from the field. Roopali Das ma'am is the founder of Twashtri. She has completed her masters in psychology from Delhi University. She is a researcher, educator and a psychologist. Dr. Shivantika ma'am has done her masters in industrial and organizational psychology. She has completed her PhD in personality and self from Delhi University. She is currently working as an associate professor at Vivekananda College. She is a parenting coach and an experiential learning enthusiast. Mr. Suraj Shah is a master degree holder in clinical psychology from the University of Mumbai, where he acquired a comprehensive understanding of psychological theories and therapeutic techniques. His approach is rooted in client-centered philosophy, tailoring, and intervention to meet the unique needs of individuals. Now let's begin the session with Dr. Shivantika, wherein she'll be explaining some major aspects of Indian psychology.
A lot of times, there are a lot of myths associated with what Indian psychology is. So one thing that I wanted to clarify in the beginning is that Indian psychology is not restricted to India. It is not something which is bounded by geography, right? So, and Indian psychology is not as it is taught or researched or practiced only in India. So, and the other thing is that when we talk about Indian psychology, we are not propagating about a particular religion. So a lot of times when the so-called Western psychology or the mainstream psychology, the kind of criticisms that we usually get is that it is not a secular psychology, or it is not, it is about a particular religious viewpoint and doesn't cater to all these religions or all the cultures, etc. And so when you actually go deeper into the Indian psychology, you would realize that it is not just for the people in India, or it is not just bounded by the Indian, so to say, geography, or it is not just propagating a particular thought or a particular idea, so to say. Then what is Indian psychology? As you can see it, I have highlighted the portion universal. It has a universal appeal. This particular Indian psychology, it has universal appeal. And if you even try to Google terms like spirituality or consciousness studies or the study of the soul and the spirit, mind, body, and spirit integration, you would find a number of researchers that are there, not just from India, and I would say very few from India, and most of the studies are being done outside India, including the European nations, Australia, America, etc. So what I wanted to say is that Indian psychology has a universal appeal, and that's why it is so relevant. That is why it is a thriving field. It is an approach that is based on the ideas that are rooted in the Indian subcontinent, and that is why the term Indian has been used, right? Here, I would also like to differentiate between Indian psychology and indigenous psychology, because many a times people get confused between the two. When we say indigenous psychology, we can have indigenous psychology of India and indigenous psychology of Sri Lanka and indigenous psychology of Japan and China and America and Australia and so on and so forth. As many countries, as many cultures are there, because that psychology is more about the folk traditions, the cultural practices rooted in a particular cultural context. In India, we can have a lot of indigenous psychologies because we have myriad cultures, right? But when we talk about Indian psychology, it refers to the theories, the concepts, the practices that are rooted in the philosophical traditions, that are rooted in the ancient scriptures, the age-old scriptures that we have, that are rooted in the Vedas, in the Upanishads, and we have a lot of schools of thought. I'm not going to go into the details of the systems or the philosophies or the darshanas, but to make the point clearer, that it is in that sense, that's why it's being called Indian psychology, because it is rooted in the Indian cultural philosophical traditions. Then another important thing I wanted to ask before we go on is what comes to your mind when you see the first picture and what comes to your mind when you see the second picture? Anything in particular that comes to your mind when you see the first picture? Anything that strikes you when you see the first picture? Just one word for the first picture and one word for the second picture. Okay, brain versus whole body and beyond. Yes, Mukti. Aura, spirituality. Second picture is scientific. Okay, I think I should not have written Indian and Western beforehand, because that might color the perception of the pictures. Indian is the soul and Western is the brain. All right. Vartika says soul and brain. All right. Okay. So when I saw these pictures, for me, you know, yes, Anisha, exactly. The universe is in you and Western is you are in the universe. So it's a very different viewpoint. And that brings us to the notion of reality in the Indian as well as the Western paradigms. So if you look at the Western, I use the picture where a hand is reaching out to study something. So Western thought system, Western psychology, the mainstream Euro-American psychology that we follow and practice is mostly believing in that reality which is outside, which is physical, which is concrete. And go back to your systems and theories classes where we talked about things that can be seen, things that can be measured, etc. So it is mostly confined to something that is available to the ordinary waking consciousness, right? And mostly that realm is that of physical and social. Physical was emphasized more as compared to the social, but gradually the social has also been incorporated into the understanding of Western psychology. But if you look at the Indian psychological perspective, you will find that it is more about going within. So it's not going outside first, but it is more about going within. And therefore, for them, the reality is Sat, Chit, and Anand, right? And it would be elaborated later on by Roopali. So if you look at the differences in the reality, for one, there is a physical reality, and for the other, the reality is spiritual in the realm. And that's why many of you have mentioned that you can relate it to soul or you can relate it to brain. So there's a difference between brain and soul, because the moment we say brain, we know that there's something physical about it. There's something quantifiable about it. The moment we say soul, there's something ephemeral about it. There's something which is only to be experienced and cannot really be held or measured or concretely compared, etc., etc. And that is exactly how the Indian psychology becomes different from the Western psychology. I'm sure a lot of you would have struggled with when we try to create tests and tools for measuring certain things. And there are things like compassion, or there are things like gratitude, which are meant to be felt and experienced from deep within. How to put it in terms of observable thing, or things that can be seen, things that can be compared, things that are only available to the ordinary waking consciousness, things that are not coming from deep within. And that is where the Indian can contribute, the Indian psychological perspective can contribute. The second thing that is important to understand is how the knowledge is gained. So one is that what is the notion of reality, which is ontology. The second is how knowledge is gained. अब ये reality तो है हमारे पास, इसके बारे में हम समझेंगे कैसे. तो अगर हम वेस्टर्न साइकोलॉजिकल पर्सपेक्टिव, अमेरिकन साइकोलॉजिकल पर्सपेक्टिव से देखें या मेन स्ट्रीम साइकोलॉजिकल पर्सपेक्टिव से देखें, तो भाई जो रैशनल माइंड को दिख जाता है वही चीज है, वही सही है. दैट इज द ओनली ट्रूथ दैट इज देयर. समथिंग दैट कैन बी एक्सेस्ड बाय द रैशनल माइंड, समथिंग दैट is accessible, available to a normal waking consciousness. That is the way you can gain knowledge. So whether it is experimentation or observation or interviewing or whatever it is, nowhere it would be talked about that you go within to understand what the truth is or what the reality is, right? It is mostly that you look at it from an external perspective, from outside perspective. So on the other hand, in the Indian psychological perspective, you would find that they talk about, they're not denying that rational mind is not important. Rational mind definitely has to be cultivated, and it has to be something which is required, because we have to transact life in this world where a rational mind is also important. But apart from the rational mind, they also appreciate higher sources of knowledge. So when we look at the Western psychology, the moment we talk about subjectivity, people are like, it's a bias. So always subjectivity or the experiences of the researcher or the kind of beliefs of the researcher, all these were taken as biases that need to be controlled, that need to be taken away. Otherwise, they will contaminate the process of gaining knowledge. On the other hand, in the Indian tradition, you would find that they very strongly believe in that if there are certain feelings or there are certain insights that we get, or there are certain intuitive understanding of the knowledge or understanding of whatever the reality is, it is taken as a valid means of knowing the truth. And in fact, it is, if I can say that, it is actually the better way of knowing the truth, because if we are focusing just on the rational mind, looking at the outside, perhaps we won't be able to go within. Now, another thing that I wanted to bring here is that when we talk about, you would have heard about this particular thing, house and home. When the moment we look at a house, there is something which I would say, अगर घर को समझना है तो वेस्टर्न पर्सपेक्टिव उसको हाउस की तरह देखेगा. दीवारें होती हैं, इतने कमरे होते हैं, इतने दरवाजे होते हैं, इतनी खिड़कियां हैं, ये है वो है, ये सुविधाएं हैं, ये हमारा बाहरी वो हो गया. बट जब हम किसी भी घर में घुसते हैं तो एक फीलिंग आती है, एंड देन वी फील लाइक वी आर एट होम और वी आर नॉट एट होम, राइट? So that feeling, that kind of experience that you are having is something which you would gain only through the Indian psychological route, because the mainstream Western psychology, I'm not saying, I mean, now even Western psychology to some extent is embracing these things, and therefore you would find the surge of qualitative research in psychology. But still, the mainstream psychology is all about scientific objective methods of experimentation, etc. So when we try to understand कि भाई किस तरीके से इस knowledge को gain करना है, तो Western perspective हमको बोलेगा कि objectivity is the only way, that is the ultimate ideal. Science के लिए ultimate ideal objectivity होता है. And first person subjective reports were used to be not considered unless and until they are quantified in some manner and some statistical analysis is done. Most of the times they rely on the third person objective measure. So we know that how whether it is tests or scales or interviews or observations, it is on the basis of the third person objective measure that we try to understand reality, or we try to understand what truth is all about. On the other hand, the Indian psychological perspective talks about that there is objective sense-based knowledge, but that objective sense-based knowledge is something which is a minor form of knowledge. In fact, if they also call it ignorance, avidya, because that is not the real knowledge. So because it is not the real knowledge, what appears to us outside, and that they refer to the entire world as illusory in nature or the play of Prakriti, which is not the real truth. So in order to understand the reality, the truth, they talk about the first person's method, right? And what is the first person method is that you practice it and then you know the truth. And that is why we talk about self-realization here and not self-actualization, because the truth is within us. So when we said that, here somebody has mentioned that whole universe is embedded within you. So, and that will come only by realizing that this whole world is within me. And that's why they rely on first person's method. And that is why you will find so many um, writings and so many things, first person accounts of the spiritual experiences that people have had. And in Indian psychology particularly, that's the reason case study method is one of the most important method, case study or life story analysis or whatever you want to call it, because there you know that this person's experience or journey has been this. So irrespective of how many people, you might not collect data on thousands and thousands to generalize, this one person's truth is able to validate that this is actually the truth because that has been realized by that person. And therefore, in the Indian psychological perspective, we try to understand even non-physical existence. So we know that psychology is all about non-physical existence. You can't have just physical part of the existence. Reality is, multi-layered in that sense. So we talk about, we actually respect the inner world. We do not just limit it to what can be seen, what can be observed, what can be measured, what can be compared, etc., what can be manipulated, etc., etc. So that's something which is one of the most important contribution, I would say, of Indian psychology. And I think the credit goes to the Indian psychological thought systems, that even in the Western thought systems, they have tried to now accept to some extent the study of the spirit and the soul. And that is why spiritual psychology is one of the, so to say, divisions of American Psychological Association. Pehle nahi hota tha. Pehle it was outside the realm of the scientific study. Right? When we come to the philosophical foundations, again, I have discussed most of them. Here, it is more scientifically rooted, where you are going to follow all the so to say, the steps or the rigors that are there in the scientific perspective. But that doesn't mean that in the Indian psychological perspective, that it is not scientific or it is unscientific in that sense. So if you look at the philosophical basis of the Indian psychological perspective, you would find that they are somewhere based in the wisdom of lived experiences. And that is something which adds a lot of value. Then, if you look at the practices, you know about Western psychological practices. We all keep practicing different kinds of therapies and psychometric assessments and keep doing experiments and research and all these things. In the Indian psychological perspective, somebody also mentioned in the audience that, they know how in Ayurveda, Indian philosophical or whatever traditions can be used, but how in psychology it can be used. So you have Ayurveda, you have yoga, and yoga, not just yoga doesn't mean that you're only talking about asanas or exercises. It's a very different whole. I mean, Sri Aurobindo said whole life is yoga. So in that sense, yoga is all about the unity of the individual soul with the universal soul, right? That unity, that this entire journey of unity with the universal soul is what yoga is all about. Then you also have different paths of doing that, different, so to say, spiritual practices that are there in karma yoga or bhakti yoga or jnana yoga, Buddhist practices of mindfulness, compassion, gratitude, and all these things. So you would find that Indian psychological tradition also has to offer a lot of, so to say, things, and it has a huge repertoire of things that can be, utilized in different arenas in life, right? Uh, there is something, I mean, I just can't, okay, yeah. So when we talk about the self in the Indian context, and when we talk about the self in the Western context, you would find that when we in the West, it is most about the independent individual self, and that has been one of the major criticisms of psychology, so to say, irrespective of whether it is from the Indian psychological perspective or any other perspective. Later on, humanistic psychologists and transpersonal psychologists, existential psychologists, they also, I mean, existential was more or less individual again, but somewhere that realization, Maslow talked about spiritual domains, Rogers talked about the spiritual domains. So all these people started realizing that, the current psychological knowledge system that we have is not enough, and perhaps we have to turn eastward to, take all those things into account or incorporate that in the understanding of psychology and the practice of psychology. So one of the most important thing, that is the unit that we study in psychology, is the person, the individual. But how is this individual conceptualized? In the Indian psychological perspective, the notion is that of interconnected self. So the self that is interconnected, which means that we all are somewhere connected. And that is true because we all are a part of the same universal consciousness. We are actually that universal consciousness. It's just that we've lost touch with that, right? So when we talk about a self in the Indian tradition, we talk about Atman or soul. And it is important to understand that in the Western psychological perspective, self also was somewhere limited to just the ego, right? And later on, you would find that many Western thinkers also talked about that how ego is becoming a problem in the sense that it was increasing, so to say, more conflict. So there's ego, we talk about boundaries, we talk about space. Now, this is in contrast to what Indian psychology is about. Indian psychology talks about how each one of us share common divine core, right? So we are sharing. So when we are sharing about something, how can we just talk about our own, boundaries? I'm not saying boundaries are not important, but at the same time, realizing that this connection is also there. So it's a very beautiful concept of understanding that how this self is interconnected to the larger cosmic reality, and that would inevitably emphasize the transcendence of the ego, because ego is something that divides, that separates, that discriminates, right? That individuates. And self in the Indian psychological perspective is something which is more of a space of interconnected networks, if I can say that. And you would see that in technology, particularly when we talk about that cloud technology, when everything is interlinked, that is the kind of consciousness we have. It is just that because we are only focusing on our sensory perceptions and what is visible to us or what is available to our all the sense organs, we feel that there is no other, and that is avidya. Because of that, we are not able to appreciate this interconnectedness all the time. In bits and pieces, somewhere we do realize that we are connected, or we feel that sense of connection. We are thinking about somebody and that person calls, or we are intuiting something and then immediately you're thinking about something or talking about something or trying to find something, maybe not even verbalized it, but then you get the answer from somewhere, which only tells us that somewhere everything is interconnected. And I think the COVID-19 pandemic taught us in a very big way that how each one of us are connected. So irrespective of the geographical boundaries, we cannot deny that, we all are sharing something. And that is something which is very, very important. And now, I just found it on one of the websites of learningmind.com, where there's an entire report on how spirituality, philosophy, and science all are showing that we are all one. So that interconnectedness is something which is very, very important. And to be able to distinguish or separate the ego from the real self. The personality of the person is something different. The ego is different. The mind is different. The buddhi is different. So you would find that the entire psychological apparatus that is referred to in the Indian psychology is something which is, which has a lot of components. So it's not just about the brain or the mind. In the Indian psychological perspective, it's important to understand that even mind, from some philosophical viewpoints, like I think the Sankhya Yoga perspective, even the mind is a part of the Prakriti, and which is a part of the material realm. It is not in the part of the spiritual realm. So we have overemphasized mind, but there is something which is beyond mind, right? Something which is beyond mind, which would help us connect to the larger consciousness. So it's in the Indian psychological perspective, it is important to understand that the concept of the person is that of an embodied consciousness. So we are consciousness. We all are consciousness, and we all are the same consciousness. So a lot of problems in this world are going to resolve if we understand, we somehow appreciate that that we all are connected in some or the other way. Then what are the ingredients? I'm a teacher, so I have a very, very particular way of going about doing it. Before this, I would ask you another quick question, about some magical moment that you have experienced in your life, or very deeply moving experiences that you have had in your life. Just narrate some experiences that you have had in your life, which are magical in nature, which you feel touched you very, very deeply. Okay, I'll answer your question towards the end, the phenomenological research designs. Any particular thing, any particular experience that you can term as magical, that you feel is something which is which touched you deeply, which resonated with you for a long, long time, and you're carrying it still within you somewhere? Is anybody writing, or shall I continue?
I'm writing.
Okay, thank you, Anisha. Okay, so Shrestha says, laughing endlessly over a very silly joke with my partner. They kept laughing even when I stopped, and it made me laugh more. All right, thank you, Shrestha. It's beautiful. Okay. The first paycheck at a young age which made you feel proud. All right, Khushbu, the first time you completed a meditation course. The first time you went to Pondicherry. I completely agree, Roopali. Yeah. What was there when you visited Pondicherry for the first time, or you did a meditation course for the first time, or you achieved the paycheck for the first time? I kept thinking that nobody believes in me. When one day one of my professors told me, I expect so much from you. And from then I started working hard. I had prayed for God to give me a sign, and I felt like it. Wow. Uh, Art of Living Sudarshan Kriya, which I do every day, it gave me so many miraculous experiences, can say by grace, that deep meditative state, letting go of stage fear in college for the first time. Beautiful. Now, if you look at the narratives, you would find that in some of them, it is like you transcending some limitation. And in some of them, it is more like connecting to something, somebody, some place, something. And I've asked this question a lot of times in my classes also. And most of the times, the kind of answers that I get for the magical moments pertain to the person being in something relating to something. It could be nature, it could be person, it could be a place, it could be something. So sharing or laughing with your friend, for that matter, or a motivational interaction with your teacher, or connecting to nature, being in the mountains, things like that. And that somewhere exemplifies our interconnected nature, the basic thing that we're talking about, that how self is connected, right? Now, coming to the ingredients of Indian psychology, I think I don't have much time, isn't it? 5 more minutes? All right. So the ingredients of Indian psychological tradition, I've used Palanchpe's 1984's work, Psychology in the East and West. It's a meta-theoretical framework, right? So why it is a psychology-friendly meta-theoretical framework? Because you talk about emotions, you would find that in psychology, Indian psychology. You talk about mind, you talk about intelligence, you would find that. You talk about personality development, self-development, you will find that. You'll have wisdom pertaining to everything, how to lead a good life, preparing for what are the goals of life, how to, overcome sufferings in life, how to view sufferings in life, everything, all that wisdom is there. So it's a very psychology-friendly, meta-theoretical framework, because we are not, today I'm not referring to any specific theory particularly. Then a theoretical analysis of the structures and processes relating to human personality. We all know that. Later on, I think one of the Panchakosha's theory will be discussed also by Roopali. A normative account defining the nature of higher and lower levels. So one of the beautiful part of uh, Indian psychology is that it helps us aspire for something which is higher or deeper. One of my friends tells me that, why do you have to use higher and lower? Why this hierarchy in the discussion? And so it could be deeper also. It could be somewhere which is more meaningful, more so to say, helping you move from within, that kind of a thing. So it is something which gives us a goal that we can truly aspire for, right? A set of techniques designed to help not so well developed individuals. So how can I do that? And one of the most uh, beautiful ways in which it has been also embraced by the West is the yoga psychology, but Ayurveda for that matter, how Ayurveda and yoga together can be taken up for the development of the individual, and a set of social institutions. So somebody mentioned about I do art of living, so darshan kriya, or going to Pondicherry and experiencing something there, or it could be. So we have a lot of social institutions like ashrams or schools or those kinds of places where actually these things can be facilitated. And I think one of these social institution is this Twashtri right now, that we are through which we are facilitating this workshop, right? So this is what Indian psychology actually has. And some of the core characteristics of Indian psychology include that plurality of perspectives. So you can't say that it is monolithic. It is something which has different perspectives. You have a question and you will get an answer. You believe in duality, you will have it. You believe in non-duality, you'll have it. You believe in monism, you'll have it. In Vedanta also, you'll have different. So there are various viewpoints, perspectives that you would find, that I believe if you have a question, you'll get the answer in Indian psychological perspective. Then the other thing, that reality is not just material. And I think psychology took a long time to realize it. Mainstream psychology took a long time. You remember, you would have studied how psychologists had physics envy and they wanted to make psychology a scientific, objective science, so to say. So this understanding that reality is not material, it is spiritual, is something which took a long time, but it's a very important contribution that Indian psychology has to maintain. And how mind is also in the realm of matters. We talk about mind-body relationship in psychology all the time, not realizing that even mind is a part of the physical manifestation, right? It is not the absolute truth. It is not the ultimate reality. It is ancient, very old. People talk about kya purani history ki cheezein lekar ke aa jate ho aap log, but we know that how contemporary it is. And anybody who is practicing any of the techniques or meditation, pranayam, even for that matter, the kind of mindfulness things that we have, anything that you will practice, you'll find that it is so helpful. So it is contemporary and it has survived thousands of years. So it is extremely valid. It's an experiential science. Something which made me get interested in Indian psychology is that it was experiential science, that it has numerous life stories to exemplify. So you can take a Vivekananda's life story, or you can take Sri Ramakrishna Paramhans, or you can take Sri Aurobindo, Mother, anybody. I mean, not anybody, but a lot of people who are on this path. Contemporary times, mein though, even people like APJ Abdul Kalam, I would find him to, he's such a deeply spiritual person. You take his life story and the kind of practices in which he dealt, how he interacted with the people and the assignments that were given to him, and for that matter, Mahatma Gandhi, all these people, somewhere they have helped us understand that this is something which actually can be imbibed in our life. So it is not something that is just हवाबाजी की, ये तो बड़ी बड़ी बातें करते हैं, फिलोसफी की बातें करते हैं, भगवान की बातें करेंगे, डिवाइन की बात करेंगे, but होता कुछ नहीं है. ऐसा नहीं है. The moment we start the practice with aspiration and discipline, you would find that it helps you in some way or the other. And the fact, and because we all have that colonial mindset कि भाई अगर US करेगा तो हम भी कर लेंगे. तो it didn't, I mean, we would not practice International Day of Yoga unless and until it became International Day of Yoga, where everybody internationally is actually practicing and putting it on the media. So it is being embraced by the West and scientifically validated. So I think I would urge all of you who have interest in Indian psychology to actually, take it up, because there are a lot of applications of Indian psychology. You would find it in positive psychology because it is all about virtues, transpersonal psychology, moving beyond the personal. It is also about health psychology, how Ayurvedic understanding can be incorporated into the health psychology in therapy, counseling, in management, human resource management, all these places you would find, even educational psychology for that matter, everywhere. And a lot of work has already been done in these areas. So it's not just that we are just talking about it, but actually you would find, and maybe if we do another intensive workshop into the details of the applications, we can take up the particular work that has been done from the Indian psychological perspective in each of these areas, and take it further. So I think Suraj will elaborate more on the applications in the therapeutic domain. So I would like to end it here, and maybe we can take up the questions later on. Thank you so much for your participation in this workshop and also answering the questions.
Thank you,
Hello,
ma'am.
everyone. Yeah.
I think Suraj, now you can take over. Thank you so much.
Do you have the control, sir?
Yeah, I do.
See, even the control is shared.
Yeah. So, thank you, Dr. Shivantika, for a very, I think, enlightening, a very broad perspective on what Indian psychology is. And uh, I would take it a little forward on the similar lines. Okay, if I'm not able to change my uh, slide. Wait. Yeah. So, I think ma'am was right. Indigenous and Indian, you can call indigenous within IKS. We could have even small ethnic, like even a tribal philosophy or tribal culture to be also included. But I have chosen to still call it indigenous, and we can call it Indian indigenous knowledge systems. Uh, uh, my sometimes my worry with the word Indian is many people restrict it to the current geography of India, whereas India was a very large entire Asian Oriental continents would fall under, for example, even in Myanmar, or we have roots widespread. So I get worried with the word Indian because it's people think it's current India, but even Pakistan, Sindh, Bangladesh, everything is technically the whole subcontinent could be called as India, not politically, but if in the terms of roots. Now, of course, if indigenous knowledge systems would have many subcultures, ethnic, groups, but major schools we can call which have flourished as proper theoretical schools could be Jaina school, Vedic school, Buddhist school, and Sikhism. These are major four schools we can call. Then we have further branch outs. Of course, Charvaka is also a school which I should have included, but major four schools. Whereas modern scientific knowledge systems is psychology, neurology, psychiatry, which is based on the parameters of modern science. Okay, so many people say that, oh, Indian knowledge systems are not scientific. No, they are not scientific because your definition of science is based on modern science. Okay, there are different knowledge systems in itself, whereas the modern science can take wisdom from the indigenous knowledge systems and make it, for example, mindfulness. Now, what is mindfulness done? It has gone back to Buddhism, taken the essence from the Buddhism, scraped away all the philosophical assumptions, scraped away all the theoretical assumptions of Buddhism, took away the technique, and it's saying, oh, it's evidence based. Why is it evidence based? Because it's able to give us the peace. So it's pragmatic. Whereas, are we able to prove the assumptions of Buddhism from scientific perspective? No, because they are meta theoretical, they are metaphysical. But modern science has come to an understanding that not everything, even within modern science, we are able to prove, you know, in terms of direct, empirically. We are assuming a lot of theories in modern knowledge, scientific knowledge systems also. So they're different, unique systems. So let's not say, oh, this is not evidence based. Your concept is not evidence based. Of course, it's your definition of evidence comes from the definition of modern science, knowledge system. So let's not try to measure IKS from the scale ruler of MSKS. So that is not fair. First of all, you have to understand these are separate knowledge systems. Now, we as psychologists are trying to go back to the roots of. So it's not that psychology started. We started to started to study psychology 200 years back. No, psychology has been studied ages, like medicine also. It's been studied since Greek and since Ayurvedic times. Then there comes a certain, you can say, a time where we say, oh, this all falls under modern medicine, this all falls under the traditional medicine. Okay. And it's based on, again, a Euro American way of defining what is modern and what is, it's very colonial way. Okay. But still, okay, we would respect that. And to say that what we are doing as Indian psychologists, okay, we want to go back, just like, you know Westerners have completely commercialized mindfulness and made it scientific. There are so many other schools within Indian philosophy and Indian religious systems which can still be used in the context of modern scientific psychology also. We can take the techniques. We are not telling everyone to believe in God, or to believe in our philosophical assumptions. Not, we are not expecting that. Okay, it's up to people to whether they want to believe in the metaphysical assumptions or no. And they cannot be proved. These are metaphysical assumptions which will remain experiential in nature. They can never be brought down to, we can never study it empirically. Okay, in terms of, okay, can you measure God? You will never be able to measure God. We are not even aiming to do that. But can the belief in God pragmatically help you to achieve hope? That comes under the realm of modern psychology, where we look at pragmatic use of these concepts. We are not looking at proving these concepts. Okay, so and also going to the further route. So let me ask you one simple question. Uh, uh, okay, okay. I would ask everyone to keep a hand on their heart and close your eyes and feel your heartbeats. Open the eyes, open your eyes and look at the world around you. Again, close your eyes and you can see the darkness. Again, you open your eyes and you look around. There is a world existing. And again, you close your eyes. There is darkness, but you can still feel your body. You can also feel your heartbeat. Okay. Now, the fundamental question comes, is this, there is life in you, which you know that you are alive and the table or the laptop in front of you is dead. Is this life just a product of human cells, or is there some principle which is providing that sense of aliveness to your body? If you think of a dead body and you can see that you're able to perceive the world around you, you're able to also perceive your own body. This is the fundamental starting point where the modern scientific systems and the indigenous systems diverge. We believe, which is also known as the hard problem of consciousness, which still people are debating, the assumption, and both the schools are assuming. Okay, we can say even modern scientific knowledge system is assuming that this sense of aliveness that you are experiencing is a product of brain. It's just the attention principle which is created in some part of the brain which is providing that life. And when the heart stops pumping, the blood stops going to the brain and the body becomes dead. That's all about it. Okay, this is also an assumption because we don't know what is prior, right? This all comes after we are born. Okay, whereas in indigenous knowledge systems, we are saying there is a principle which is providing that sense of life. How is the heart beating? What is telling the heart to beat? There has to be a principle prior to this through which we call life, right? And when someone dies, what do we say? Pran chale gaye. In a colloquial language, we say the prana has left, the soul has departed. So this has come to us in our colloquial language, and this is even in Western religions. Spirit has gone. So universally, we have been believing there is a principle which cannot be just output of the brain. If that was the case, we should be able to make a dead body alive, regenerate the brain. The body should be alive, but that's not happening. Okay, now this principle is where we, according to IKS, the entire problem starts in the sense having the body itself is the first issue. It's not a normal or a natural state. Okay, we are primarily bodiless and we are getting a body. Okay, where this because of the with your existential ignorance, whereas the modern systems are taking this body and mind for granted. Okay, you're born with a body and mind. Okay, and now we will so take it for granted, that phenomenon for granted, and we'll build upon it. Okay, so let's yeah. So these are the Maslow's needs of hierarchy. That if I have a body, okay, I will need food, water. I need to earn for myself. Then I'll have safety needs. I'll have needs to belongingness. And psychology is taking these needs for granted. These are the needs you're born with. These are psychological and biological needs. And we will strive the entire life to make your life better and better and better. And we'll help you to, climb up the stairs of the Maslow's needs of hierarchy. My question is, why do we have these needs in the first place? Indian psychology does not take it for granted for us to have a body in the first place. Then we have to strive to earn and feed this and sustain this body. On the top of that, we need people around us, and imagine the existential, like Buddha realized this is, I cannot take this for granted. Getting born, then growing old, sickness. He refused to take these phenomena for granted. And he says, no, I want chutkara from this. So we are not, Indian psychologists have not taken, like philosophers have not taken these needs for granted. Imagine if you didn't have these needs. You think, this whole life we are striving to, and these are so fragile, right? One job loss you have, so much anxiety around job loss, people losing, we have to lose people around us, we have to grieve about it. Is this something that is an ideal life? Imagine a body which we have to now strive to go to job 8 hours, earn some money. We are we are questioning this. So it's not only solving the problems of this life, okay, and making this life better and better. It's solving the fundamental existential question of why this body in the first place. Because with the body came all these needs. Okay, with these needs comes all the problems. Okay, with the physical body we have all the illnesses, and then we'll study in modern medicine, will study harder and harder and harder to solve the disease. But body itself is the first disease. Getting this form itself is the first issue that Indian psychologists, like philosophers or Indian religious systems have. Okay. Then in having your loved one. Again, I'm not saying that these are abnormal. This is abnormal. It's okay as human to have these needs. It's also okay to strive to get these needs, but we are going way deeper than assuming that this is it. Okay. So imagine that if you see all the problems that your clients have in psychotherapy, that, oh, I'm very feeling very anxious that I will not perform well, in my exam. Why? Because I have to pass. Why? Because I have to earn. Why? Because I have to sustain. Why? Because also I want something, I want more comfort. So are there, so my question is, are these needs uh problematic because you think this is normal? This is the normal. This is not again nihilism. I'm not saying that we should stop existing. What I'm trying to say here is our fundamental nature as per Indian knowledge systems is to exist eternally. But when we associate that with the body, we are continuously living in anxiety to die. Everyone has death anxiety that no, I don't want to die. But you will not die. The body dies. Okay. So then everyone has a need for example, belongingness. I want someone to belong to. You don't need one body to belong to. You are universal, one principle, and you belong to everyone. So Indian psychology is trying to solve these problems not at just human level but at existential level. Okay. So uh, let's go to the next slide. I hope you all are understanding that it is going to a very existential level and not just solving problems of this life, where we take this mind body for granted, these needs for granted. And what is science doing? Modern science is striving to make these achieve, help us achieve these needs, right? Make our lives more and more better, elongate our, with better medical systems, we'll have more longer life, which is okay, which is good. But my question is it solving the larger problem of having the body in the first place? Uh, so, wait, wait, yeah. So I want to ask, what is that entity that experiences this needs? Okay, who experiences this needs? So you will say, oh, I experience. I want, you know, I want a good house. I want, someone to belong to. I will die. So what is the fundamental first assumption is that I am this body. And this is the body and the mind, which is talking right now. It has all the needs, which modern science takes it for granted. Okay. Why do we have these needs? Modern science would say these are evolutionary needs. You have been, again, they have their big bang to fall back, that this is what evolution is. And evolution is all about survival of the fittest. These are again theories. Nobody has seen evolution. Nobody has seen the big bang. We are assuming this, okay? But Indian psychology or Indian philosophy questions this. No, we will not take it for granted. Buddha questioned it, that no, I am not going to take these needs for granted, and I'm not going to strive the entire life just to fulfill these needs and die one day. I want to get out of the fundamental. Where is the fundamental cause? Okay, the fundamental cause lies in existential ignorance of who I am. Once that ignorance gets resorted through experiential, you go experientially within yourself, then not only your problems of this life get solved at existential level, you don't have to take new births. There is no need to acquire this human form again and again. Okay. So uh okay. So wait, it's lagging. So scope, if you see what is the entity that experiences these needs, who experiences this, this is where the two systems are different. Modern science would say this is the mind and body which experiences this, and these are normal needs for everyone to have. We'll take it for granted. Okay. uh Assumptions, who are we? The assumption is, according to modern science, we are, output of the brain, and once the brain dies, we die, and we'll have to make this life big. Okay, we'll make sure these needs are fulfilled to the best, which is from where capitalism comes. Okay. And how do we know that? Because we see it's empirical, right? The baby was born. How do we study developmental psychology? We would see, oh, these are the needs that you were born with. Okay, and how these needs grow, we take the needs for granted. And this is where they start. We go up a step prior. Where are the needs coming from? Who is born? Why did the person born in the first place? Okay. Is that the sense of aliveness just a product of the brain and the heart? Or is there a principle prior to it? Okay. What are the methods? How do we experience these needs? How do we know that? Again, modern science would say empirically we see these needs. And how do we know that? Because of empiricism. But Indian spirituality says, or Indian schools of philosophy have gone within, like Buddha went inside and tried to find the root cause of the needs, or Vedic rishis went experientially within and found the root of these needs lies in assuming or the existential ignorance that I am this body and the mind. And because of this association, the entire samsara continues because we keep desiring, desiring, desiring. Also, we don't want to die. Why don't we want to die? Because it's our natural quality to live forever. But is that possible if you consider yourself as a human body? No. Hence, you die with a new seed of reincarnating into a new body because the desire to exist with the form stays. Okay. Now you may tell me that these assumptions of reincarnation and consciousness existing prior to body is all metaphysical. Yes, it is metaphysical. Just like Big Bang is also an assumption, this is also an assumption. Okay. Now it's your choice whether you want to believe or no. Okay. If you ask me, how do you prove reincarnation? No, I will not prove it. We are not here to prove it. This is experientially to be understood. Okay. But these understanding can help us to get a larger framework in our life to make sense of why so much of unfairness in the world. Why is a person dying? So how do we make sense of this? Okay. So this is where these concepts can help us get a larger understanding of existence. Implication and application. So what do our interventions aim at? If you see that how these four things are connected. When you believe that you are the mind and the body, then you will take the needs for granted, and your methods will all be empirical based because there is nothing prior to this mind, eyes. Hence, this is your methods of knowing the truth. And all our applications is going to be to make the human life better, okay, and big, okay. But when your scope is, when your scope of study is metaphysical, you're believing in the principle prior, your assumptions are different, your methods are different, and the implications are also different. So these are two different knowledge systems. We cannot try to fit this into this or this into this. Then the question is, then why this? Why the session? As I said, the session is maybe the wisdom from indigenous knowledge system like mindfulness, how it was taken from Buddhism and it's applied in MBSR, MBCT, watch things with equanimity. Even without this assumption, the technique is working. Why is the technique working? We will say it's working. It's statistically significant that the group which underwent MBCT is more, the anxiety is alleviated than it's working. Why is it working? Because its assumptions could be true of the metaphysical assumptions of Buddhism, from where the technique is coming could be true. Hence, the technique is working, which modern science would not comment on. They would really not comment on. Okay, which is okay. But all I'm trying to say, maybe the techniques that further Vedic philosophy or other schools of Indian schools are using could still pragmatically work, and modern psychology can extract it. Okay. For example, now I'll just give you. Yeah, I am feeling worthless. This is a common phenomenon which clients would come to you. I'm feeling very worthless because I'm not, good enough. Root of all majority of the clinical disorders, or is I am not good enough. Now, what does CBT do? CBT would say, you know, what is the evidence that you're not good enough? Maybe you are, see, look at yourself. Maybe, it would give you context that it's not that you're not completely not good enough. You're good at something else. Think your REBT would say, you know what, you're a human, you're a fallible human being. There's nothing to prove. Just be yourself. Okay. This is how the modern psychotherapy tries to pacify this is a very core existential question of wanting to feel worthy, because the consciousness is infinitely worthy, and it's because it's associating itself with a form, it's trying to find worth in achievement, in multiple things, and it's normal that we are not be there are people better than me. Okay. Now what IKSS is, what is the cause of not feeling worthy? Okay, is it just because you have a distortion, cognitive distortion? No, there is something that you are experientially not in touch with, from where you're not feeling the sense of worth is uh you're not able to extract that sense of worth. Only when you're in touch with something higher principle, the need for worth will only not arise. So there is no question of pacifying you with these. I to feel it's like using what do we give a baby to chew? You know, yeah, whatever you put in the mouth when the baby's teething, okay, to just to pacify the child. When we are telling, okay, look at yourself, maybe you are better in something, don't have to associate your worth with what you do. Then what am I supposed to associate my worth with? How do I feel worthy? No, you are a fallible human being. REBT says the question for worth itself is wrong. You are just a human. You will always remain human. Now, what is actually, it still pacifies people. Now, why does it pacify? Because the underlying principle is that there is a shared humanity. There is no need, nobody becomes more worthy or less worthy. Okay, but this is still intellectual conversation. IKS goes a step further. We will put you in experience with that principle. Experience, okay, not just talking. We'll put you in touch with an experience which is universally the same. Nothing can be added to it, nothing can be taken out of it. Even if you achieve higher positions, there is nothing can be taken out of that principle, nothing can be added. What is that principle? That's where the inquiry starts. Who am I? Okay. If you say, if people have death anxiety, again CBT would pacify in some way. Okay, there's whole existential psychotherapy coming in. But how? These are your fundamental needs. Okay, because of ignorance of who you are, there is no way you can pacify it by talking or by. Okay, you can low key pacify it. Okay, but IKS goes at the very root cause of ignorance. Who am I? Okay, and it experientially wants you to experience the principle through which you feel the sense of aliveness, the principle through which the heart is beating. Okay, so does it mean CBT, RAPT is not good? No, they are good at human level. They pacify us, fine, they work, they make us feel better. But all I'm trying to say is Indian knowledge systems goes way step higher, way more deeper, way to the root cause, and they're trying to help us alleviate the existential suffering. Okay, and not just for this life, for many lives to come. Uh, okay. Yeah. Last but not the least, all Indian schools, though we say there are differences, fundamentally believe in this principle, samsara. They see the very thing of having this human form itself is problem. It's a first cause, symptom of the bigger problem. The first symptom of having of the larger existential ignorance is having a human form, any form, a form of an animal, human form is the first symptom. Second, law of karma. All Indian schools believe in law of karma. Third, reincarnation. That if this existential ignorance is not resolved, the incarnations are bound to come. Fourth, there is a principle higher than the mind and the body. And fourth, there is as modern science is just based on empiricism, there are other ways of knowing also. It may be intuitive and experiential ways of knowing the reality apart from just using thought or just apart from using your eyes or senses. Okay. Um, these are the assumptions from which all the Indian schools fundamentally come from. Uh, okay. Assumptions of modern knowledge, scientific knowledge systems, mind body complex is everything. It's born out of evolution. Cells are procreating. From the cells, brain cells, a principle of life comes. This is life. This is only life. You strive to make it big. Okay. You create your name. You ensure that, your names will be carved in stone after you die. You want to make it so big. And everything is because of nature, nurture. It's genetic. Okay. These are assumptions of MSKS. Okay. This is where the two systems are different. We are not saying this is better or this is better, but two systems are different. We'll try to use the wisdom from Indian knowledge systems, which can at least give us some peace of mind, some joy. Okay. Like just like mindfulness is a very good example of how two systems come on a middle ground. Okay. MSKS comes here and says, okay, I'm ready to let go of your metaphysical assumptions. आपका technique दे दो सिर्फ. ठीक है ना? But ठीक है ना, the pragmatic, let's be pragmatic. If one technique of the entire Indian school. One small technique of mindfulness has created a third wave in modern psychology. Imagine the magnanimity of our culture. There are so many techniques, okay, which could create new waves of, in modern psychotherapy also. Okay. Uh, so, okay. In my, okay. So, okay. In last but not the least, in my practice, I would say I use, if you get your clients with these beliefs. They are Indian clients. They believe in karma. They believe in some higher principle. My point is, why don't we use these beliefs, which they already believe, to help them feel better, okay, to make sense of their life, to deal with these existential suffering at multiple levels. So if only then, how do we use their beliefs? Only when we are well versed and we understand that how these beliefs can be used for their good. Okay, so Indian psychology is not about enforcing, no, you believe in karma. No, Baba. If your client doesn't believe in karma, you can go back to your traditional. If your client is atheist, okay, use your traditional CBT, modern psychology, psychotherapies. If your client is a believer, then help the client use their own beliefs in helping them alleviate their anxiety. Okay, this is the first application of Indian psychology. Second application is, at a scientific level, we can extract more and more techniques from the roots, indigenous roots, and pragmaticize it. Okay, it's okay to pragmaticize this. It's okay to not, force metaphysical assumptions on science, that no, you believe in reincarnation. No, no, we'll not force that. Let it be an experiential realization. We don't want people to believe in that. But if some of the concepts can be used, techniques can be used, just like mindfulness, why wait for Western psychologists to commercialize it, then give us certificates? I laugh it. I feel it's so funny that I have to get certified in mindfulness from Western and have to pay them dollars. So sad. They have commercialized it to new, and they're copywriting. Even I get so angry with thinking that what audacity you have to copyright a knowledge system which is fundamentally, you know, Asian or Indian in nature. Okay. And we have to go to them. Why? Because yeah, Hinduism has school for atheism. As I said, Jaina and Buddhist schools, there are two schools which are atheists. They do not believe in God as a creator. But as I said, still they're common. They all come to the common ground of there is a samsara which you have to get rid of. Now, whether you do it by praying to a higher principle or merging into it, this is where the methods differ. Okay. Uh, and these are two main applications. Of course, Ayurveda, there are others, which, as Indian philosophy is also, though it looks down upon the samsara that we have to get rid of, it also has systems to make your life better. Like we have, the Kama Sutra, or we have, other sutras also, which make your bodily existence also very happy. So it's not a complete monastic, or it's not completely that, oh, this is, let's get transcend this. No, you can enjoy this, but the larger principle is we have to also realize who we are and resolve the main cause. So this is where I think I would urge contemplative studies is an emerging branch of, it's an interdisciplinary branch which studies neurology, psychology, philosophy, religions, and is trying to come to a common ground that is there a grain of truth in this? Okay, the principle of Maya is very much now being understood with neuroscience. Very much, it's going like this close, that everything is within you. Okay, technically, the laptop which I'm seeing outside, it's inside my brain. You know that through neuroscience, it's actually in my occipital lobe getting flashed somewhere. Now, where is it getting flashed? It's something higher, which neuroscience has no answer to. Okay, so I would kind of stop here and really thank Roopali and Dr. Uh, Shivantika, for giving me this opportunity. Let's open our eyes, be open to different knowledge systems, accept their strengths and limitations, their uniqueness, and see if there is some grain of truth lying there also. Let's not close our eyes that ये सब बकवास है, ये सब सिर्फ बातें हैं. No, there can be a grain of truth which has been discovered eons before. like mindfulness. Okay. So thank you so much. And over to you, Rupal.
Thank you so much, Suraj, for that wonderful, wonderful explanation. I would like to thank Shivantika ma'am also, because the way she very beautifully opened the entire discussion, and then Suraj took it forward with specifics of what is Indian psychology and how can we make it more pragmatic. Now, Kushi, have you shared the controls with me? So I will take it a little forward from here and make you understand what is these assumptions that Shivantika ma'am and Suraj has spoken about a reality which is greater than you. And why are we contemplating on these realities? I think somebody in the chat box also asked this question: is Indian psychology then just a mere conglomeration of assumptions, or at the end of the day, like modern sciences? And then what do we believe in, right? So you have to understand what is a belief. Why do you believe? Why do you have to believe? Right? So that is the first thing that any person who is practicing Indian psychology or our sages have asked us to think. Why do you think? Why do you believe? Why do you question? Who is questioning? Who is asking? Right? There's an Upanishad called the Kane Upanishad. I love that Upanishad. I always use that as one of in my opening classes. I would use that Upanishad because it's asking very basic questions of who are you, who is talking, who is listening, who is thinking, who is believing, who is cognizing, right? And from here we move to the question of I can't seem to have the control. Yeah. So the question about, where did all of this come from? Where did this samsara came from? Why are we here with this mind and body complex? Why are we speaking to each other? Why are we doing all of this? Why are we living? Why are we breathing? Why do we die? Right? Modern science has gone up to an exploration and told us that it all came from a Big Bang theory. Now, if you're a physicist, that will make sense to you up until a point. Yes, if you try to, disintegrate matter, look into the principles of time and space, theory of relativity, all of this, it culminates to a point where they say, well, from somewhere, all of this just erupted and the world got arranged somewhere, and we all started, from the because of a principle of evolution, matter started evolving into plants, and plants started evolving into animals, and animals evolving, further evolved into human beings, and that's why you have all of this. The Indian knowledge system said, okay, there was nothing, and out of that, something came out. Please explain to me, out of nothing, how did the something come out? Where was the matter? Where was this, what was the impulse of something to come out, by the way? What was the original impulse? Who decided that something had to come out and then we all had to be born and then we all had to go through the cycles of life and death? So this is a question, a very, very valid question, right? So the Indian schools of thought, again, like Suraj mentioned, that there are various schools. There are Aztec schools of thought that believe that there is, something beyond, and there are Gnostic school of thought that they will say that there is a beyond, but that beyond doesn't really have to be a vyakt or that which has name and form. It can be a vyakt. It can be more of something which is contained in being nothing, right? One of the paradigms of nothingness that comes from Buddhism. Again, Buddhism also have different schools of thought. So one beauty of Indian schools of thought is, like Shivantika ma'am said, if you have a question, you will always find an answer. You believe in something, you will have an answer. If you don't believe in something also, then also you will have a route. You will have a way to find out. Right? So this curiosity is something I find in Indian psychology one of the building principles, that you are allowed to be curious, you are allowed to question, you are allowed to find your own answers, right? Currently, what I'm showing you on screen is a representation of how Indian psychology or Indian philosophy considers the whole spectrum of reality. Where did we all come from? This is in contrast to the Big Bang theory, where they are talking about that we all came from the Big Bang and we know the theory of evolution. So I'm just going to put this theory in contrast to the Big Bang theory, and then you make sense of it, whether this is more sensible, this is more complete, whether you're able to connect to this more or to the Big Bang. Whichever you choose, that's completely, you're open to choose. So the Indian psychology, and this is largely coming from the Upanishads and the Vedic perspective, right? That is the school of thought I'm left referring to at the moment. They say before the Big Bang, the Big Bang is the time where is the space where the material manifestation comes into play. Before the material manifestations, also there are other levels of manifestation. Material is only the matter or the form and the root that we see. We know as human beings, when somebody asks me, who am I? I'm not going to say I'm just this body. I will take up a name, say Roopali. And Roopali is, yes, a name commonly shared across India. But I'm a very different kind of Roopali, right? Me being Roopali and the other Roopali, I think there is a Roopali meeting as well. We are two different beings, even with the same name, even with the same bodily parts. So what is it that is very different, right? So the inquiry begins from there, that there is essentially, yes, the body, yes, the mind, yes, the emotions, but that essentiality, what is it? So the Indian knowledge system says that the original truth out of which all of this came, do you think there was no cognizance of itself? There was no consciousness, no awareness that gave rise to this whole creativity or this whole manifestation, out of which the Big Bang or even the intention of Big Bang came forward, right? So what they say is beyond everything, there is a truth consciousness, which they use the term Sat Chit Anand, which is a self-explanatory term which explains what that reality is. Sat stands for existence, that it is existence. It is existing. You believe it, you don't believe it. It's okay. It has got nothing to do with whether you believe or not. You are at the end of the day coming out of that material, that fabric, right? So, we have in our colloquial common terms, parents will say, "Tum mujhe for granted, whether you believe it or not believe it, I am your parent. I have given you birth, right? You want to consider me, you want to give me that credit, you don't want to give me that credit, that's okay. I have formed you and I know that." So that truth at the end of the day is that self-existence, right? Which out of which every other manifestation, it's not just the human manifestation we are talking about. We are talking about at the very principle of atom. That atom is born out of it. That is existent. Consciousness is, it is aware, it is conscient, right? Sri Aurobindo in his book, The Life Divine, starts with this first question in the chapter. If we all came out of Big Bang, and if it all of this was utter chaos, then explain to me how every atom, how every electron in the atom knows where exactly to place itself in the electron or in the different orbitals, and how we know that water to form and to form water, two hydrogen molecules have to combine to an oxygen. I'm sorry to say, but we did not create as human beings the water, right? And water is a thing that we all need to live. So then we question, yeah, there must be something, some intelligence that brought all of this, that made water, that made the atom, that made the electrons, that conscious entities. And if we are even following physical sciences, and if we are even following that we are matter, then well, our electrons are pretty much intelligent. And it's not just the brain. Your whole body is intelligence. Your whole being is intelligence. So that is Sat Chit. Anand, that is the last bit of it. Now, Anand is the most beautiful, I guess, the whole part of the explanation is it explains why the need for creation. why we ask this question, why the need for creation. And it says that all the creation, all the manifestation is for the sake of ananda, for the sake of bliss, the joy of experience itself, right? The joy of experience which comes out of creativity. Now, here I'm sure a lot of you here practice some kind of art or some kind of, when you sing, when you dance, when you cook something, there is a joy that you find out of that creativity, isn't it? So at times, just looking at ourselves and just looking at our own activities, we can fathom about the, eternity. We can fathom about what that conscious reality is. So we have the stories in the Puranas as the divine mother playing with the creation as the divine child, right? And these parables then make sense. So out of that truth consciousness, which is self-existence, conscious bliss, another terminology which is used in the Vedas for the same truth consciousness is Satyam Ritam Brihat. Now it's important to understand these concepts because rest everything you can read and understand. But these concepts are something which are very ephemeral in nature. Right. So a lot of times people come, the clients come in with a particular problem, right? And they will say, well, I am like Suraj discussed a lot of problems. I've left a job and I've lost a job and it's making me feel anxious, right? Now, the true reality when we look at these terms, Satyam, Ritam, Brihat. Satyam is truth. Ritam is the right order or the harmony of the truth, the right order of expression and harmony. Brihat is wideness. Now, the idea portrayed here that truth cannot exist in narrowness. It can only exist in utter wideness. And when I say utter wideness, it encompasses the space and time and beyond the space. That is the idea of wideness, right? In wideness, the true nature of truth, the complete truth, can be manifested in its complete order, in its true order. So, what we are living right now are partial truths, the relative truths of our little existences, right? Something that Suraj also said that, you are only thinking about the little needs. But what about the higher existence? So, the complete truth of the being is that Satyam Ritam Brihat. And the Vedic parable is all about, I'm going to touch briefly about the Vedic parables, but it is all about finding that complete truth of your existence, of the laptop's existence in front of you, of other people's existence in life. So it's not just your truth. It is myriads of truth manifesting the same ultimate truth. To concise it, they use the Upanishad says you can't really understand the ultimate truth because it's beyond understanding. It can only be experienced. And once you have experienced, you don't really need words to express it because words are still shorter, a manifestation, a very limited means to express that. So we use the only sound we use to express that truth is Om, right? And maybe we can do this as an activity. Maybe all of you can chant within yourself. Maybe you don't have to even open your mouth. Just try to, chant Om, keeping your mouth closed, keeping your eyes closed, and see how it feels. And then maybe you can tell me. So let's take a moment, close our eyes, and chant Om within ourselves. You can open your eyes and you can tell me how it feels to chant. Where do you feel the Om when you are chanting it? Where in your body do you feel? He used to write it. Write it in my heart. Yes. from stomach upwards and beyond. Yes. So the beauty of Om is it will touch your core first, right? And the Mandukya Upanishad goes in details talking about what the sound of O, O, Ma experience, manifest in the whole being of the creation. So it's the higher plane, it's the life plane, the Antariksha, the higher plane which is called the Swar. The same we use in the the Gayatri mantra, Om Bhur Bhuvat Swaha, right? So Swaha is the higher plane of the being. Bhurva is the Antariksha or the vital living plane of the being, and Bhu is the material, the very matter of the being, right? And Om is the only sound that can be experienced at all the three levels: the very material, the in between, and the transcendent. And that's why it's used so much in our tradition, right? So Satyam Ritam Brihat Satchidanand, the sound that can only be used is Om to express it. Yeah. So out of that truth consciousness, the cosmic consciousness comes into play. When the divine, in its own, conception, decides or has an intent to come into manifestation, forms the first aspect of, what we call as the Prakriti and the Purush, the dual aspects of the being which is witnessing and the being which is manifesting. In all of us, we have that, right? The you who is listening, at the same time, there is a part of you which is also thinking and also questioning, right? So the one which is listening, but at the same time, the one which is at the movement, in the contact, which is participating, right? So we use the terms Purush and Prakriti. It is not a gender term. It is not about femininity, about masculinity, and all the gender dialogues that happen today. But it is the two voices of the being, of which the humans are a representation of the voice, right? So maybe we probably will have another workshop to go into the details of all of this, because this is wide, this is huge, right? So out of that, Purush and Prakriti, the universal consciousness. Now here is the place where Big Bang is, right? So the third stage where you see the universal consciousness is your space for Big Bang, because here the time and space things come into, right? The whole material of the Big Bang is in the universal consciousness, the mind, the Brahma of the Puranas, right? Which is or the Brahma in some of the Puranas, it's called the Paraprakriti. But out of this, the concept of time, the movement of time. Now, first time came, and then the principle of space came in, right? Because without stretching itself, it cannot form the space, right? So the stretch comes from time. We have past, present, future. It's the stretch, right? The space is the stretch in the vertical horizon, something that physicists would probably go into more details and that will interest them more, right? Then came in the Panch Mahabhutas, or the material manifestation of the being. We use this concept of Panch Mahabhutas, which forms the basis of Ayurveda, which forms the basis of understanding the human being also in the Indian psychology, right? Which is made of the 5 elemental principles, which is space, air, fire, water, and the earth. Now, interestingly, they correspond to our 5 senses, and they also correspond to the psychological concepts of the being. I will touch onto this a little later once we have moved a little forward with understanding the Panch Koshas, right? So the idea is that the ultimate reality involves itself, it forgets itself into the ignorance of matter. And this whole evolution is not just the evolution of the species. It's not the evolution just of the living being, what Charles Darwin says. It is the evolution of the whole nature that is happening. And today we can see it in our living reality also. Imagine the kind of biochemical synthetic matter that we have created, isn't it? It is because of the principle of mind that the matter has been evolved, has been transformed. We have plastic. Plastic is not a naturally occurring element. Some of us may debate whether it is right or wrong, but it is a principle of nature which is evolving. So matter is evolving. So is the other elements. The life principle is evolving. Today we know that there are so many creatures in the deep sea which have gone through transformative evolution in the last couple of decades. Why? Because of the presence of light, because of the presence of darkness, something that nature is doing and evolving them as if to make them more intelligent. So human beings who so far so forth thought that they were the most intelligent creatures, well, in the upcoming decades, perhaps not if we don't, upgrade ourselves, if we don't upgrade our systems. That's why we have AI, artificial intelligence, which is also pushing our limits of intelligence, which is also pushing our limits to cognize, to think, right? So this whole idea of evolution, which is ingrained in the Indian psychology, gives us a lot of space to work with many things, to understand how matter is connected to the soul that we call as the soul, right? How the soul is connected to the universe, how the universe in itself is very conscious. You know how when you at night look at the sky and you feel that wonder of being one with the sky, being one with the star. We have these, quotes saying we are all made of stardust, and we all like to believe it. We all would, love to believe that we are all made of stardust, because being the stardust gives us that, that ephemeral reality that we are not limited to this little being. We belong to the universe, the larger universe, right? So if we all believe that, if we all have experienced that, then why are we so afraid of saying that it is scientific? Just because your present tools cannot measure it. Like Shivantika ma'am said, you have your psychometric tests and all of this, but compassion cannot be measured out of that. No matter how many questions you write into that psychometric test, it will still not be able to tap into the consciousness of compassion, the consciousness of Buddha, who represents compassion, right? So you have to touch into that consciousness. And that's why we use the term consciousness so much in Indian psychology, which has been time and again debated by people that why do you use the term consciousness, and it is just a product of the brain and the mind. Well, I'm sorry to say, now the studies prove even the plants have consciousness. They can they utter out, or they make certain sounds when they are in distress. They make certain sounds when they are in a good condition, when they're happy, when they're joyfully singing, right? So science has upgraded itself, perhaps psychology has not. We are still studying what people wrote. Some people wrote 500 years, 100 years back. That's it. That's all the purview of psychology we have. But there is more to it. There's always more to it. So I have briefly mentioned here in the PPT about how space corresponds to the sense of sound. Now, just look at yourself and think. Where do you hear sound? Sound is a quality which is found in space, right? It cannot be made into, it matter will have, but its first manifestation is in space. You cannot smell through your ears, right? You cannot smell space. Space has no smell. That's what our scientists tell us, right? How space has no taste. That's what our scientists tell us. It can only vibrate. There can only be a vibration. Hence, there can be only the characteristic of sound in space, right? Space corresponds to the psychological aspect of the soul in the being, where you hear the sound of the soul. There's nothing else. There's no way. You cannot taste the soul. You cannot look at the soul. You cannot, touch the soul, but you can always hear it. Traditions, even Christianity says that God comes and tells you something, you hear it. So why do you have to hear it only, right? Because the space only has the vibration of sound. Then comes the aspect of air. Air is the principle that allows movement, right? Sound has to be carried, and it is carried through distance through the movement of air, right? Air is something that gives you the aspect of touch. Right? The next one is the element of fire. We use this word in Hindi that aankhon ki jyoti chali gayi. Your eye lost its sight or this capacity to the fire of the eye. The characteristic sound or the corresponding sense of fire is sight. It corresponds to the psychological aspect of will. The next one is, we use the term that person has a will to do something. He has a fire within himself. So we use it in language, but we don't use it in psychological understanding. The next one is water. Water corresponds to the sense of taste, which corresponds again to the psychological aspect of emotions. Now, emotions have positive and negative. We don't have emotions which is nothing. So there's either a positive or negative, right? So it corresponds to the psychological aspect of emotion. And lastly, the physical body, which corresponds to the element of earth, which corresponds to the element of sense or the sense of smell. And I'm not going into much into detail of all of this. Probably we'll take it up later, and all of this makes more sense when you're experiencing it and making sense of it. A lecture probably will not be able to encompass the whole, taste or the rasa of this understanding. So then we move on to the next element, which is the 5 layers. So how do we understand the human being through the Indian psychology purview? So we see the being is not just the physical body, like Suraj said, it's not the physical body. Then who are we? So the Indian perspective looks at the being at 5 levels of existence, which you are living at all times. And it is your consciousness or awareness of different levels that make you, contact or interact with the reality at that time in that state. So you have the physical body or the Annamaya Kosh, the energy body or the vital body, which is the Pranamaya Kosh, the emotional body, which is the Manomaya Kosh, the Vijnanamaya Kosh, which is the wisdom body, and the Anandamaya Kosh is the bliss body. We hardly go to the state of Vijnanamaya, or we are hardly in touch with our Vijnanamaya Kosh or the Anandamaya Kosh, but we are mostly in contact with our first 3 levels, which is the physical body, the energy body, and the emotional and the mental body or the emotional body. So I would ask you this question. If I ask you this question, how are you feeling right now? What will you tell me? You can feel free to write it in the chat box. How are you feeling right now? What are you feeling right now? A very simple question. Very intellectual, okay. Curious and happy, okay. What else? Anybody feeling hungry? It's about to be the lunchtime. You can feel hungry. Yes. Yes. So when we say, how am I feeling? We are either saying at the bodily level, how am I feeling, right? That may be hungry or irritated or maybe a little hot because there's less air conditioning in the room, or maybe a little more cold because there's more conditioning in the room, right? So that is our awareness of the physical body, the Annamaya Kosh, right? The second is the energy level. Somebody wrote curious and happy. That is your Pranamaya Kosh, where you're deriving your sense of being at the moment at the energy level. So how am I feeling? I'm feeling enlightened, I'm feeling curious, I'm feeling happy, right? The third is the Manomaya Kosh. The Manomaya Kosh is the emotional body. Now, emotional body, Man, is a term that we use to understand the mind as well, right? The principle of mind also comes into the domain of Man. It is beyond mind that goes to the domain of wisdom. right? So we have in our mind an aspect which is just looking and cognizing, just giving us a quality of understanding, basic understanding, right? What Sri Aurobindo calls a sense mind. You are looking or you're hearing something, you are looking at something, you are listening to something, reading something, and your mind is making sense of only through the stimulus interaction. What today modern science considers as cognition, right? So there is perception based on stimulus interaction. But the Indian psychology says that your actual mental domain is much beyond that. It is your ability to think rationally, beyond rationally. That it is your ability to uh, use your discriminative intelligence. So intelligence is put a little above reason in Indian psychology, and it's the beauty of it. Where in modern psychology, we all put it under the domain of mind, and reason is a part of the aspect of mind, intelligence is an aspect of mind. But we don't ask this question: where in mind? What is this? Why is intelligence different from reason? Right? What is the difference? Is there a difference or not? So be those people in psychology who ask these questions. You ask this question in your classrooms as well. Probably then we'll shift to Indian psychology more in explaining this. So you feel intellectual, and some of you here would be critically questioning these ideas also. So that is the aspect of you which is more into your manomaya kosh, right? Which is based on its preferences, based on its partial, earlier understandings, questioning us. Part of you would be feeling something which would be telling you that, well, there is some truth into it. I should go into exploration more. That is your part of Vijnanamaya kosh, where you feel a tremendous joy of knowing. As a child, when you would struggle to solve a problem in mathematics and you would wait for 2-3 hours and come back and suddenly you know the answer. We use this term incubation, and incubation happened, and now so suddenly the mind has answered. It is coming from that state of vijnana, your true self, which already knows everything because it's part of that true reality. It is the part of that truth. So it is what has brought all of this into the world. So it already knows. And that's why our Upanishad says, you already know everything. You are the Brahman. You go inside and ask yourself that question. Why am I here? Why am I doing this? Right? Who is, why this exploration is needed? Right? And that's why when we say that, well, I've not seen Big Bang, there's still a part of us which says, well, I'm pretty sure I must be there in the beginning also. I don't feel like flipping out of nowhere. There's a part of me which must have witnessed this whole, this whole starting of the creation. And that is your space of Vijnana, and that moves to your being in the blissful body, which is your Satchidanand self, right? Your true identity, which is the Parabrahma that we use. So how, of course, we are not going much into detail because of the time constraints also. Possibly we can take another workshop and dwell more into the details of the purviews of Prakriti and Purush, and how they come together to make the whole reality of the being. But at this moment, I would just like to share certain anecdotes from the sessions, the counseling sessions that I usually have, and what people derive out of this approach. So it's not just me as a practitioner who is practicing it. I'm also going to share certain people's, clients' understanding of it. So, like Suraj said, a lot of clients usually come with this understanding that I'm not just this, body and this mind. I'm more than that. See, the first question, and they'll come with their problems. They'll say that, probably I've lost a job, or I've relationships, big issues. Somebody left me, I left somebody, XYZ of the relationships. So you ask them this question that, okay, tell me, what is your bigger aspiration in life? What is your true aspiration? Aspiration, not in terms of goals, not in terms of a relationship, not in terms of, these outwardly means. But what is that one thing that when you're on your deathbed, you look back into your life and you feel like, well, that was something I've always wanted to know or always wanted to do. And most of the people will come with an answer like, I want to explore love, or I want to know everything in the world, all the possible things that can be known in the world. That is the part of your Sachidan and the Brahma telling you that, knowledge, power, love, harmony, and perfection are the four aspects of the true Brahma that we talk about. And it always goes back to understanding love in its true essence, because love comes out of bliss, ananda. So it wants to experience its ananda again, right? The knowledge comes out of truth. It wants to experience the truth again. All the people, irrespective of whether they are aware of the Vedas, whether they do yoga, they don't do yoga, whether they are atheists, non-atheists, whatever they are, when you ask this first question, what is your aspiration? They touch something very, very, very essential. And that essential is your key to take them forward. And as a practitioner, what do you use? You use the Satyam Ritam Brihat. That is the principle. From their relative realities, you bring them to a more absolute and complete reality. Slowly, not in one session, of course. But your approach as a counselor is then to make them understand, okay, these are little things in life, right? And there is a rasa in this also. There's a bliss in the heartbreak also. There's a bliss in death also, But one has to see it, one has to experience it. And when I say this term, there is a bliss in death, please don't take me as, somebody who's very, insensitive and who is using this term very insensibly. I have personally experienced death. I lost my father when I was very young. And I asked this question again and again and again, what is the need for death? Why to go through it? And I can say that out of a lot of love and compassion in my heart, that yes, principle of reincarnation, exists. And because of that, we can let go those people who die in a more beautiful manner. And we accept that death as not just, an end to life, but probably just a break, and somebody else is, that person is going to come back in a different way. And they are going to carry on with their line of evolution. So you are not using a CBT here just to tell, rationalize people. You are making them understand that this line of evolution is working for all of us. And we cannot, and that's why we are transitory in nature, because we have to evolve. We have to evolve into our eternity, right? So then there's no point of, in that grief that we feel. So we feel grief, that's okay. But through that grief also, how beautifully we understand what life is. Through death, now these are the things that your Upanishads always talk about. Through death, you understand life. Through darkness, you understand light, right? Through limitation, you understand limitlessness. It is the means through which you will understand. So maybe you don't have to crib about the life and the world and, working 24/7 and trying to call your needs, fulfill your needs. It is through these fulfilling these limited needs, I understand I'm not meant for this. And I'm going to look out for something more. So the limitations are also a means to understanding the limitlessness, right? So with that, I guess I'm just going to briefly touch into the parable of Vedas. Why am I doing this is a lot of people today talk about, the Indian knowledge systems, we talk about Hinduism, and there is a lot of religious debate and XYZ going in our country and around. But very few people touch or talk about the fact that exactly Vedon mein likha kya hai? What is written in our Vedas? We talk about Vedas, our Vedic rishis have so much of gyan and they have, told us about everything too. There are 4 major Vedas, Rig Veda, Yajurved. I'm not going to touch on all of it. I'm just going to give you one small parable from the Rig Veda so that you understand the psychology of the Vedas. That's my only intention of, talking about it here. And I've put, very comical caricatures for you to depict the 2 major characters of the Vedas. Indra, whom we see as the god in the Vedic parables. No more, we don't worship Indra anymore. There's a debate or thought about it also. But Indra is the god or the being or the aspect of psychology, right? The aspect of the mind, the higher mind or the divine mind in the being. What we talked about as the Vijnanamay Kosh, somewhere there your Indra resides, right? So Indra is the power of the higher mind, right? It represents the power of the higher. Vala is one of the characters in the Vedas which represents a thief of darkness. Now, Vedas are symbolic. They are using symbolisms and parables to tell you something about your own psychological character, right? So, whenever you are reading the Vedas, one major understanding you have to keep in mind is what they're talking about is not just things happening in front of them. They are talking about the things happening inside them. So they are using certain, just say we use the term mitochondria, no? Interesting, somebody used the term mitochondria and we are all using mitochondria for that little part of the cell. We never question why mitochondria, kaun tha mitochondria, kahan se aaya mitochondria, right? But for Indra, we are like, kaun hai Indra, kahan se aaya Indra, why are we worshipping Indra? Good enough, you question. So Indra is the aspect, again, Sanskrit is an interesting language which has a lot of logic in it. So you don't use any word without its root sound actually representing the thought, right? I'm not going into detail, that's a different thing. So Indra represents your higher consciousness, the higher divine mind, and Vala represents that part of your ego, which is the miserly thief that wants to keep everything for itself, right? So that is, we all have that part. I'm not saying that I am studying Indian psychology, so I'm not miserly. Well, I have a part of it, right? I have a part of the ego. So that is, the story goes something like this, that Vala is, he's a thief and he takes away all the cows and the horses of the divine sacrifice and keeps them in his cavern, in his cave, which already have a lot of riches, which already have a lot of diamonds and a lot of golds and riches. So these cows and horses, again, the term cows and horses represent something in the Vedas. The cows represent illumined thoughts, the thoughts of light, right? The thoughts which are higher, which are light, which have light in it. And that's why cow holds that symbolism in Hinduism also, right? Horses are the representation of power. Now look at the two animals also, you'll find the characteristics with them. So horses represent power and cows represent the thought power, right? So it is thought and power, which is of the divine consciousness. So Vala takes in all the higher thoughts and your power and keeps them miserly for its ego or its subconscious ego desire principles. Yes. Now, I think here all of you who have studied psychology are aware of Freudian subconscious, that iceberg imagery, right? That's the only imagery that comes to us when we're talking about consciousness and the structure of consciousness. Now, what if I tell you it's the same imagery in the Vedas which is used? It's the same imagery, ditto, right? So maybe Freud took it from there, I don't know, or it might have passed on to different religions or different places. But there's no point fighting about it. What we know is that there is a mention of that subconscious cave in the Vedas as well. So the subconscious is the home of the Vala. The subconscious is the home of the limited ego principle, that which separates you from everyone else, right? So the more you take all your thoughts and all your emotions just to satisfy your little ego being, the more limited, powerless, and anxiety prone you feel, because you have to save all of this which is from other, no? And hence we have so much of competition around the world where all the people are fighting for certifications, for degrees, that I got into this college, I got into Delhi University, I got into NIMHANS, somebody else did not get into NIMHANS. This is all display of the ego and limitation, and Vala acting in all this. Vala is the principle that holds back, hence the term used, right? Indra has to fight the war with Vala. And the wars fought in Vedas are very interesting. Nobody is killing anyone, right? So Indra goes to Vala and convinces Vala to give all its riches in the sacrifice and participate in the yagna, in the sacrifice of the being. So we act on the ego and make our ego understand that we are limitless beings. Yeah? Why are you limited to this little things about me and myself and everything for me and my competition? How good I am, how bad other person is. And he convinces Vala that you are also part of the divine. So let go of it. So these are the stories, the parables. So divine, the higher mind, higher principle in us has to act like the lower principles. Shivantika ma'am said this. Why do we use these terms higher and lower? No, people keep asking. It is in our being. We can't, let go of it. We have a higher principle and we have lower principles. The lower principles, they are made of limited ignorance. That is an aspect of material nature itself. Right. And this opens up the purview of counseling here. There are so many things that you can hear also as a counselor, use your creativity. Dwell into the parables yourself, dwell into the experiences yourself, and try to see where in the other person you see that limitation. And how can you bring them out of that limitation? How can you make them understand that, you have an Indra in you? Use your divine intelligence, your higher intelligence. Use your higher intelligence. Let it work on your aspects of, that goes into depression. Depression is not considered a disorder in Indian psychology. It is considered just as a symptom in Ayurveda. It is a symptom that you have to deal and you can very well come out. So yes, you will have relapses, but depression is not something that defines who you are essentially. You are just going through a phase. We all go through these phases. That's okay. Because we are all coming out of that ignorance. So we are bound to go through all of these, ups and downs. So see how your outlook towards your client also changes. When you see your client at the Sachidanand walking into your room, when you have nothing else than just to be, grateful that you come to meet me. And okay, you are into your ignorance, but I will try to help and bring you back into your own awareness. Yes. So there is a lot to understand or a lot to take from Indian psychology. As Suraj mentioned, you can pick up pragmatically the tools, the exercises, as well as at an individual level, as a practitioner. When you practice it, it changes your outlook towards the world. It changes your outlook to how and what you are dealing with, right? So no person in front of you is any less. And when you have that conviction within yourself, your client, takes that as it's an energy flow. And they start believing that, yes, I can get out of it. I have personally experienced that. When you feel within yourself that a person sitting in front of you is actually the divine, they catch up that vibration and they heal themselves. They heal in manners in which you as psychologists would also not know that they could have done this, but they make you understand, okay, this was a part of me, this was a part of my manifestation of Sachidanand. So I guess when we are talking about Indian psychology, it is, I think with this, I will end the presentation, but I will open the room for questions. We have, of course, a lot of things that we have not been able to touch because of time constraints. We have not been able to go into details of theories. But what we have tried today is to give you just, a taste of it. Maybe how can you approach the whole field? How can you approach the whole domain? And I feel that we three people, we came up with, three very different ways of understanding, teaching it, but we all connect to that Sachidanand and Brahma part of us. And that is why we were able to do this session today. We were able to come together and do this session today. I cannot thank enough Suraj and Shivantika ma'am for doing this and bringing their own knowledge, their own understanding to this. And now I would say, if we can open the room for questions. I think we had a few questions in the chat box already. So I would ask Suraj and Shivantika ma'am to take those questions maybe one by one. And if you have more questions, feel free to write them in the chat box, and we will try to answer as many questions as we can. But if we are not able to answer all of them, maybe you can write it to Shivantika ma'am or Suraj or me in email, and we will try to revert back through emails.
So actually, I'm not able to access the questions because my electricity had gone. So I had
Okay.
logged off and logged in. So now the chat box is empty for me.
Okay.
So yeah.
Kushi, maybe you can read those questions for us. These are some of the sutras from the Rig Veda. If any of you are interested in reading them, we are also going to send you a compiled list of reading, certain readings that you can access online, which are free of cost. We'll also send the link to the compendium of Vedas and Upanishads and all the Shastras available online. They are all available free of cost online. So all the people who think, where can I read the Vedas from? We will give you the link. Take your time, read it, right? Read the original thought, and then maybe decide whether what is right or wrong. A lot of us, we believe what Max Muller said about the Vedas, but I'm sorry to say Max Muller is no authority to tell us what is written in Vedas. He hardly knew Sanskrit also. So somebody who wrote doesn't even know language. I, at least as a person, as a human being, will not take them as the authority on something. And most of the interpretations, which probably Manu Smriti, which Dr. Ambedkar burnt, was an interpretation of Max Muller, which was completely utterly garbage, and even I would have burnt it. So that's okay, right? So even that's what I say, that try to read the original text. Even if you're reading the Gestalt, and I'm sure nowadays in psychology we don't even teach the original text of what William James wrote, what William Wundt wrote. So, so always try to go back to the original text. If you don't know Sanskrit, learn Sanskrit. You can learn German, you can learn Sanskrit. It's not that difficult. It's actually similar, very similar, right? Okay, so we have got a couple of questions. Kushi, would you like to say?
Yeah, actually, there was this one question during Shivantika ma'am's lecture. Somebody was asking about phenomenological research designs. If you could give some clarity in that area, like it being more
Yes.
holistic experience.
Again, when we use the word holistic, it varies. So I think Suraj mentioned while he was talking that, the assumptions are very different. So when I say one is taking a more objective route and the other is taking a subjective route, I'm not saying that subjectivity is not objective one. Second, it all depends on, the assumption again of the phenomenological perspective is also that you are a separate, bounded entity. It doesn't say that that they're in their belief system that we are sharing a common code, or that we are embodied consciousness or something of that sort. So I can study subjective experiences, but that doesn't mean that from the phenomenological perspective, but that doesn't mean that it belongs to Indian psychology, because the kind of epistemological, ontological, methodological assumptions that are there are very different. So, and then even the word holistic, when we say biopsychosocial model, according to the mainstream psychology, it is a holistic model. But then we know how holistic it is. So that's what I have to say.
Yeah. Okay, so Richa Tripathi asked about expand on art of Satchit Anand in terms of action and experience. Okay, so who would like to take that?
Okay, the art of Satchidanand. Now, it's a beautiful term used by Richa here. The art of Satchidanand. The art, yes, we should try to become the Satchidanand in all our actions, in all our interactions in daily life, right? Like I explained, the Sat is existence, Chit is consciousness, and bliss is Ananda. Now, if you look into these practices of mindfulness, what are they trying to teach you? They are trying to teach you to be mindful or conscious or aware of the moment, right? What happens when you are aware of the moment? You are aware of the truth of the moment. You are aware of the bliss of being in it, right? So you can take up this basic tool or technique of being mindful, being present, being conscious, right? And then always go back to this state of your true being, which is coming down to interact, which is coming out to interact. Of course, it's a difficult state. We are all trying to be there. Somebody like Sri Ramakrishna, Sri Aurobindo, Sri Ramana Maharishi, Swami Vivekanand, they did it, and we know who they are, right? When Swami Vivekanand will speak to people, would speak to people, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people would just want to listen to him. Maybe they didn't understand any of it, but it's just the sound and vibration of that man made them connect to something higher. And that is the experience, the art of Satchidanand, I would say, right? When Sri Ramakrishna would speak, he was not a Harvard graduate or MIT graduate or doing XYZ research on neuroscience, but he was aware of the truth, the eternal truth, and he was manifesting the Satchidanand always. When people would just look at Sri Aurobindo, just one look, and you are done. You know that line you have for when you talk about your lover. One look and you are done, right? That used to be the kind of look of Sri Aurobindo. People would just look and connect to eternity. When mother, you would look to the mother and connect to that. We have so many accounts of people who have manifested that art of Satchidanand in our living, breathing life. Maybe for Western psychology, it's difficult because they don't give much of importance to who really Jesus was. I'm sure if they started understanding who Jesus was, they would have nothing else, no contentions. Then to understand that one light or one look into his eyes would actually connect you to the Satchidanand. So that is, I would say, Richa, that is the art of Satchidanand. It would be best, like Shivantika ma'am and Suraj said, it is about experience. So maybe you read these cases, you read these people's, biography, what they did, how did they reach to this state of the higher being, how did they connect to their higher self, right? It's not something that I can teach you probably, or we can teach you in one workshop. It is a, now you have got a question, now you have got a direction of inquiry, and this is your aspiration that I want to do the art of Satchidanand. So that is an inquiry. If we could give a fertile ground for that to begin, rest of the journey in itself is very joyful. The moment you start finding try to find that reality, try to find that truth, you can approach it through science. There are today many scientific exploration. I'm somebody who is very interested in quantum physics, so I keep reading what happened in science and light plays a very important role in energizing the system. It's the same parable goes in Vedas, how the light of Indra brings the darkness, Vala out of the darkness. Same principle goes at the physical level. You can approach it through music, through poetry, through dance, through any modality. But if your aspiration is correct, then whatever way you choose will probably take you to the art of Satchidanand. That's what I would like to, answer it with. If Ma'am Shivantika, Ma'am Suraj, you feel, answer it further, please go ahead.
I think you answered pretty much all. When this question was asked, I thought of if you look at any flower, just by looking at it, there is Sat, there is Chit, there is Anand. So I think, and as you said rightly, that it is not something which is inaccessible. In moments, we all experience it to some extent. When we ask the question of the magical question, also some of them mention that while doing this kriya or this meditation or this thing, they experience that particular thing. I think that is the glimpse that we have of Satchidanand. And then with practice and all these things, perhaps we can understand, we would know how it can be actually, we can realize that thing.
So all peace essentially comes from Satchidanand. Even the peace from material happiness, it's what Rupali said is we essentially become mindful of the moment. When you eat something very tasty, when you listen to a very, so you are essentially coming back to the moment, even through sensory stimulation. Okay. So, but it's that we are taking the mode of matter to come back to and get a taste of our own selves. Indian psychology or Indian philosophy is all about learning the art without depending on the matter or sensory experiences to realize the ever existing getting in touch with the principle without taking it's like touching your ear ulta when we are eating something very tasty. We essentially close our eyes and say for the moment say wow, but the taste is what is happening. The heightened sensory stimulation is essentially bringing us back to the moment where the truth exists. We have conditioned ourselves to that. So that is the fundamental essence why mindfulness is also working, is because unconsciously it is getting us in touch with the principle. Though the modern psychology will not agree to it, but essentially it's the principle which is, you're touching through, becoming very aware of the moment through taste or through working, that is generating that sense of bliss inside you. So it's the principle is ever existing. It's just learning the art to harness it more and more. With we have different systems. We have yogic school. We have so many systems in Indian psychology through which you can harness that principle more effortlessly. Yes.
Okay, that was very insightful. And
Um,
am I
there is
audible?
another question. Yeah.
Yeah. So, does Indian psychology has a solution to existential crisis? To be specific, question pertaining to the magnanimity of the universe, the limitation of your being and time, and everything else. So, this is by Anisha
I think
Roy.
she's
I think,
frozen.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Maybe I will take up
yeah,
the question and just so Rishi can
yeah.
answer the question. Huh? So it's okay, Kushi. Let me take up the question and Suraj can answer it. Does Indian psychology has a solution to existential crisis? To be specific, questions pertaining to the magnanimity of the universe, the limitation of your being and time, and everything else. So, Suraj, would you like
Yeah,
to take
so answer to the question is, see, Indian more than yeah, when you say Indian psychology, yes, Indian schools of thought all about, they start questioning the existence. They go back. So when we experience existential crisis, that why am I here? All it's all about that. So you pick any Indian school of thought, you will start with, why am I here? Who am I? So these are the questions definitely they contemplate upon, they ponder and try to find an existential answer, to this question. So I would say it's essentially all about that, you know. So I hope I'm able to answer your question. Of course, different schools will vary in their assumptions, but I can say all pragmatically want you to experience peace eternally. So, which is also the aim of modern science. What is modern psychotherapy is also aiming at making you peaceful and happy. So is Indian philosophy and psychology. So within Indian schools, yes, they will have different ways, different assumptions, but all would end up with finally they would call it nirvana, or they would call it, becoming non-dual, or they would languages would differ, terminologies would differ, assumptions would differ, but pragmatically they all end up to the one point. Hence though it's very pluralistic, Indian school may thought like, we may think that y'all are so confused. Everyone is talking differently. One school is talking there is no God. One school is saying there is God. Even initially, even this is to frustrate me. Like, why so many disciplines schools? But at the end, I realized they all culminate to one single state of being. That's where my confidence in these approaches improved. And I also realized that they start with different points, starting points for different types of people to accommodate different styles of thinking. Even if you're an atheist who does not want to believe in any higher God, it and you are having an existential crisis, you can go to Indian like Jaina school or Buddhist school. They will take you and resolve your existential crisis. So I think existential crisis can easily be solved, not only solved at this level, at the level of experience, with Indian schools. That is the power. Yeah.
Ma'am, would you like to add something?
I think the very question that is being asked is because of the ignorance that we all have, isn't it? That that I am coming from a sense of lack. So मैं तो limited हूँ, और ये duality जो है, ये limited की और limitlessness की, ये मैं कैसे पार करूँ? But the thing is that we are limitless, we are infinite, and that this whole thing right now I'm saying it, not experiencing it or realizing it, but this whole journey is all about realizing it and becoming one with it. Then there would be no duality and no confusion कि हम तो छोटे सा part है पूरे universe, क्योंकि हम ही universe है. That is, and this entire Indian psychology and all the various schools in it is all about this. If we say that it's existential crisis, yeah.
I think one important thing also here when you're talking about the term existential crisis, usually psychotherapeutic session in a psychotherapeutic session or even in our literature, we look at existential crisis through a lens of fear, utter fear, right? When we are talking from European American thought, existential crisis, no, you should not have, you should not reach there, or if you reach there, come out of it, right? The whole beauty of Indian psychology is you have got an existential crisis. Very good. Now your journey begins, right? So it is that embracing of the power to take the difficult question and the acknowledgement that I was not satisfied with this limited understanding that was given to me of life, of whatever XYZ relationships, job, whatever it is. So now I have understood that there is something more to understand. So that puts you in a state of power, that I have the capacity to understand that there is more to understand, right? It's not that I'm trying to understand something that is not there, which probably comes from a thought system which says that there's nothing out there and it's just the Big Bang, right? So I think the lens again changes here from fear to the state of power. And that is the beauty of Indian psychology. Like Suraj said, you'll have 500 different modalities and 500 different schools. Even when we take up courses on Indian psychology, we largely, touch upon the Shad Darshana, the major six thoughts, and these things. But then again, within those also, we will have hundreds of people talking about hundreds of things. And again, it acknowledges your temperament, the variation, the multitude of variations. That's why we have this concept in India of unity in diversity. How do we maintain that unity in diversity? Because we acknowledge that we are all parts of Sachitan, and the Upanishad, Isha Upanishad, use this metaphor or the symbol of we are all the rays of the sun. Imagine the infinite rays of the sun that come to you every moment, every second. That is who we are. So you stick to the imageries. That's why I love the Upanishads, because their imageries are so vibrant, and those can be your keys to inquiry, your some modalities that you can inquire into. So if you are an imaginary being like me, who loves imagination, who loves using all of these symbolizations, please refer to the Upanishads. They have beautiful symbols, beautiful symbolization, beautiful practice. I think there's one more question on happen. Okay, does divine intelligence, Indra, also comprise of giving up your own self or selflessness? To absolutely not care about your own thoughts might be deceiving or not deceiving. But then again, if we do not let ourselves dwell into our own thoughts, how do we become thinkers or philosophers? For people who aspire to find out truth that's in tandem with their existence, right? So Indra is not just the thought aspect. Remember when I was talking about the Panchakoshas, I said Man is an aspect of the emotional body. It's still the part of the Prakriti which is giving you the sense of measurement and Maya, the illusion, right? You're not going into the details. All of these terms, the Sanskrit terms, hold a lot of significance why that term has been used. So that helps you clarify this. So Indra is not the power of thought, it's the power of higher mind, which is something beyond the thought itself, which Buddha says there is a state of thoughtlessness. Go to that and then you will know the truth. In the realm of thought, you can still not touch the thought, the truth. It is through that thoughtlessness. So it is difficult for us to even imagine a situation where we are thoughtless. But I'll give you few very basic examples. There have been moments in your life when you have kind of zoned out, when you're not thinking about anything. Maybe, like Shivantika ma'am said, you're looking at a flower and you're just looking at it, you're just relishing it, you are just cognizing it. You're not thinking how beautiful that flower is, what is the color of its stem, how does the orange color comes into it. No, you're just looking. And those are your moments in your life that you are beyond the thoughts. So we need, the moment we become conscious of it. So Indra is beyond the thought. Indra is actually much, much beyond thought. And that's the power of the higher mind, where we rarely touch in our being. So there are actually theories on perception, which we were not able to cover today. There are theories of perception which say that there are 4 levels of perception through which we cognize the world through agyana, pragyana, samyana, and then vijnana. So from ignorance, the object-subject knowledge system, how do we move to a state where object and subject are one? There is no division, and that is the state of vijnana. There is no thought needed to understand. It is this pure identification with the object of inquiry itself. You become the flower. You are the flower. And that, I think, that is what the state of Indra where Indra would take you ideally, right? So these are complex terms, again, based on experiences. That's why we plan to hold workshops now, which would be more experiential in nature, maybe in-person workshops with certain, if you have colleges and if you are, in particular setups, we could do those kind of workshops if people are interested. I'm sure Shivantika ma'am can also facilitate, Suraj can also facilitate with their own understandings. But these things, today's session, all we wanted was people to think, to look at, to change the lens maybe a little bit. And if we have been able to do that, I think we've successfully done our session. So there are a couple of more questions. Okay. How does Indian psychology address the concept of happiness and pursuit of meaningful life? Shivantika ma'am, would you take this last question and then we can,
The last question is, I think, something else.
Okay.
Meaningful pursuit. I think Suraj can take it. Handle it better than I would do. I can take the last question.
Okay. All right.
I don't find to ask question, and question comes to my mind. I myself get the answer of it. That's what the person is asking.
Suraj, would you like to take that question? How does Indian psychology test the concept of happiness and pursuit of meaningful life?
So there are two levels of answers to this. One is happiness within the realm of body and mind. Indian psychology also is not that it's all about we'll find happiness only from meditative states and you cannot find happiness in the mundane life. That's not at all what Indian psychology is perceived to be. You can find happiness in a day-to-day life, but in a more sustainable way. So there is, there is a concept like of you can find happiness from alcohol and drugs, which is more of tamasic or a lower level of happiness. There is happiness in terms of more achievement and making your life, more valued, purpose driven in terms of I want to expand my business. I want to, or maybe open these many NGOs, which is also more purpose and value driven, which is more humanitarian kind of cause driven happiness, which is a little more refined version of happiness where it's more purpose and value which is driving you. And there could be even further refined versions of happiness, which is, which starts coming from within, which is unconditional in nature. So Indian psychology has a whole broad continuum. But if you look at a very basic applications of when it comes to day do's and don'ts or charya that they would prescribe, they help us to at least find a more sustainable and less violent forms of happiness. So they would say, the basics like don't steal, or we have basic five niyams, okay, yamas, of don't steal or don't engage in violence or himsa. Now, these are the ways through which they're helping us that don't go though these gross at this gross level to seek happiness, seek a more refined version. So they do have systems in terms of health systems which ensure you have a better body so that you can drive more, better happiness from more refined happiness. So, yes, Indian psychology has all the ways to offer you happiness at the level of mind and body and spirit, but they are very wise to guide you to seek a more sustainable. There's a concept of sustainable happiness. Definitely, they don't believe in very shanik or momentary happiness. They say it is not, the whole idea of being burning in the craving or burning in the craving or fire of desire. That is something all schools unanimously say there are better ways to seek happiness rather than burn in. And we also in psychology agree these are unhealthy or maladaptive ways of, coping or seeking happiness. So underlying principles remain the same, but they have a more structure to this in terms of slowly, gradually moving from seeking maybe Ratsik to Sattvic sources. They guide you slowly towards that. So even a householder can live a happy life and at the same time is going towards a more refined and unconditional sources of happiness. So definitely, I think the pursuit of happiness is a bit of a Western concept where you pursue happiness, whereas Indians believe that happiness is a natural state. But slowly they will tell you from outwards how do you come inwards to harness that bliss more and more. So, again, this is a difference in Western and Indian where they believe happiness is outside and you chase versus Indian concept where it's you are happiness and but of course they will teach you the way to access that. So definitely it's all about happiness and peace. It's not about being sad or leaving things or going in the forest, not at all. It's very integrating and holistic in terms of householder life as well as monk life. Both lives are equally respected and valued. So I hope I've answered your question.
Yes, thank you so much. That is a wonderful answer. I think we will take the last question, and with that, we will end the session. Ma'am, most of the time, Shivantika ma'am, is it the question you wanted to answer?
No, you can go ahead. Yeah.
No, I will not take it up. You will take it up. Ma'am, most of the time I don't find to ask questions. When questions come to my mind, I myself get answer of it. I find those irrelevant. This way, I'm not able to ask any questions. Even right now, I felt the same. Sometimes I feel it. Is it normal?
Again, I mean, this question can have two answers. One is that it was bound to happen. If you have a question, you'll get the answer. If you have that kind of an aspiration to find the answer, that quest within you, that burning quest within you to find the answer will come your way. And I'm sure most of us here would have experienced that. कभी भी कुछ होता है, कोई ऐसा फॉरवर्डेड मैसेज आ जाएगा, किसी का बात ऐसी हो जाएगी, कहीं कुछ आपको कोई मैसेज लिखा हुआ मिल जाएगा जिससे आपको लगता है कि हाँ यही तो मैं पूछ रही थी, यही मुझे जानना था, या कहीं today what Suraj said just struck with me. I am not enough because I am bounded by this body and mind. And I was used to keep wondering that no matter how much you do, everybody has this issue of I'm not good enough. It's such a basic thing in all of us because we are not changing that switch. We are identifying ourselves on this limited identification. So to answer this question, if you are asked, if your question is coming from the fact that I can't ask a question because I feel I'll be inferior or because I'll be judged if I'm asking a question, then I think it's important for you. And then you make up in your mind that no, this is what the answer is. Then I would say this is coming from that lack mindset that we all have, that I am not good enough, right? Change it right now. And whatever question comes to your mind, ask it right now. And then you will understand the difference in your experience, that what is holding you back, and whether it is the divine way of telling you the answer which is coming from within, or is it your inferiority and lack that is stopping you from reaching out and getting that answer. So it's very, very normal. All of us experience that. Even when I go to conferences, I feel like itne bade professor inse main kya hi puchun, something like that. But then it is normal. But then I know that it is coming from a sense of inferiority or lack, that I feel that I'll be judged for this question, or that it might not be good enough. So that one always has to check.
I just want to add to this. Buddha asked a very basic question. Why old age? We may laugh, क्यों नहीं देखा है सबको old age आती है. In India, no question is not valued or honored. These systems ask very basic questions. So remember, not a single question that comes to your mind is irrelevant, or if I ask, I'll be dumb. No, you can ask the question. It's you're as a human. Only humans have that power to inquire. Maybe you never know, the question you ask would become become the starting point to your journey. So don't take your questions lightly. The question came to me that why do I have to earn? I get a question sometimes that why, this old 8 hours, and my mind tells me like, oh, this is what life is. But no, had I not asked myself this question, I would have not started, you know, going searching for something larger. So all I'm trying to say is never ever berate yourself or think that, oh, how should I ask a question? Is my question dumb? No, you are a human and you can ask the question. If people want to judge you to be dumb, let them judge. Buddha was also judged. Okay, Western psychologists still judge Buddha that you all are so obsessed with suffering. Yes, we are obsessed with suffering because we don't take it for granted. We don't take anything for granted. Okay, so please do not at all feel ashamed of asking questions. It's your right to ask questions.
And that our true nature is never associated with shame. It's only the conditioning that is making you doubt yourself. So this is the art. This questioning is basically one step towards deconditioning yourself. And I think it's very, very important that all of us start doing that. So wonderful that, this very question, that why do I need to earn? Why do I need to work 24 hours a day? Such simple things and everybody is shocked when we ask these kinds of questions. कि तुम पागल हो गए, ऐसे तो होती हैं चीजें. But ऐसे नहीं होती हैं चीज. किसने माना कि ऐसे होती हैं चीजें? This thing we have to start questioning.
Yeah. Maybe you can start with this question, that why do I feel, inhibited to ask question? Take this question and start your journey and go backwards. This could be your starting point. Brilliant question. Yes.
Well, that was a very good question and a very beautiful answer from both Shivantika ma'am and Suraj. So with this, I think we will now end our session. We went a little beyond our timings, but I hope we all enjoyed the session. We all gained. I think I'd say for myself at least, yes, we read, we know, we do all of this, but even today's session, I learned so many things when Shivantika ma'am was speaking, Suraj was speaking. So this curiosity is never ending. It's like that part of that wants to know the original truth. So a part of it you will discover, you will read, and a part of it it will come from maybe, sessions like these where other people also come in and they tell you, they show you the other side of the truth, or the other manifestation, other ways in which that same truth can be understood. So for me personally, it was an experience like that. And even through from the questions written in the chat box, very beautiful question, and I really appreciate all the people. We have a lot of students here from psychology who are willing to know what Indian psychology is. We have other people from other domains as well, who appreciated this thought, and maybe they're also into this path of inquiry. So it's not necessarily that you have to be from the field of psychology to get into this inquiry. It's a very basic human inquiry which all of us need to do, right, at some point of our lives. So with that, I would genuinely like to thank Dr. Shivantika Sharad.
Thank you so much
for your time and your sharing your insights, and all of the participants for being with us from the beginning to the end. And we hope we could bring to you a meaningful session. And we will try to bring more such meaningful sessions. Before ending, I would just let you know that we have posted a Google form, which is a feedback form for the session, and would be very, happy if you can give us a feedback for the session with your insights and what you want us to cover, maybe for the next sessions. How was it for today? Anything you would like to tell us. So please take some time, give us the feedback, and we hope to bring you more such sessions in future, right? And before closing, I would just ask all of us to take a moment and chant Om Shanti 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 3 times for the entire world, because now today we discussed how we are all interconnected, and a lot is happening in the world outside today, in Ukraine, Russia, France, Manipur, everywhere. And there are people, there are beings at different levels, plants, animals, all of them going through sufferings. So if they are going through suffering, the least we can do sitting here as the manifestation of that Sachitana and Brahma is to bring and call that peace for the entire consciousness of the world. So maybe we'll take, with that intention, I would request all of you to close your eyes and chant Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much for your time. May you all have a great day and a great week ahead. Thank you.